Ever since I was a little girl, I remember seeing my mom up in the middle of the night studying and preparing for my brother's IEP meetings. I never understood why she would stay up so late, why she would do that to herself. Because I could see the bags growing under her eyes from lack of sleep, and I could see how she'd starve herself before each meeting from how anxious she was, to the point she was afraid she would throw it all up. And I could see her break down from how emotionally and mentally exhausted she was. The exhaustion of constantly worrying if your kid is going to be okay without you, of constantly asking yourself, what will happen to my kid after I'm gone? It wasn't until I grew up that I realized she didn't have a choice. My brother has autism. This is a development disorder that impairs the ability to communicate and interact. Because of this, he cannot learn the way other kids learn. Although he's high functioning, there are still certain services that aren't given to him. My brother and 7.1 million others rely on the government to help them. Legislation like the Rehabilitation Act of 1973 entitles them to free, appropriate public education. However, my mom has learned that despite the government defining these supports, certain services are not provided. My mom has had to go out of her way to research workshops, laws, policies, anything that would force the district into action. But why was it that my mom had to go through all that extra stress just to get my brother the basic necessities he should already be given? I decided to run my family's experience with special education programs through the Rotary 4-way test. Is it the truth that current special education programs are underfunded? Is it fair that special education programs are not accessible to all concerned? Will our need for effective special education reforms build goodwill and better friendships? Will districts treating students like people instead of paperwork be beneficial to all concerned? First, is it the truth that current special education programs are underfunded? There's a large assortment of reasons why these services are either not accessible to everybody or not good enough for those that do have access. Let's start with the lack of resources available. The Individual with Disabilities Education Act states that each student with special needs must have an individualized education plan. But with budget restrictions on specialists, there are just too many students and not enough case holders. How is each student supposed to get the attention they need when there aren't enough teachers or aides for each student to get a truly individualized plan? So yes, the truth is that current special education programs are underfunded, thus leaving their students behind. Second, is it fair that special education programs are not accessible to all concerned? These shortages in staff affect the quality of meetings and how well parents are listened to. Now imagine this. You express the urgency for an interpreter, but you aren't given one. Or they give you one, but they don't take the time to make sure you understand the situations being discussed. As a parent, you trust the professionals, you trust they'll help, and you trust they know what they're doing. In these scenarios, you don't even know what's going on, but you're rushed to sign paperwork so the meeting can be wrapped up. This happens even when people can speak the same language, because the process can be so complicated and confusing. This serves as a barrier for parental involvement. Parents feel they can't really participate because the paperwork is taking priority over the person. And these district employees know how to read the paperwork. Parents don't. Because it's specifically made to be tedious, to the point that this isn't exclusively a matter of language anymore. It affects any parent who doesn't have a degree in law. Because the sad reality is, a lot of teachers avoid explaining the IEP document because they know how strict the requirements are and how time-consuming the process can be, and they think it's too much to go into during the meeting. So who's supposed to help the parents? The obvious solution would be to hire a lawyer, somebody to interpret this paperwork for you. But not every parent can afford a lawyer. Most parents don't even have the time because they have work or they take care of kids, but they have to make time. Parents are quitting jobs so they can interpret this paperwork by themselves, so they can push the district and push the teachers on behalf of their kid. Because they don't just naturally know the special education laws, most of them don't even know their rights, which means they don't know what's supposed to be handed to them in the first place. While they can't afford a lawyer, they also can't afford to leave their kid without services. So no, special education programs' accessibility is not fair to all concerned. Third, will our need for effective special education reforms build goodwill and better friendships? Parents fight because they know how important it is for their kid to make it to graduation. Leaving a kid without services or not providing them with the appropriate services causes them to fail. And when they're not at the same academic level as their peers, they're not given the same opportunities. We are failing to support our students with special needs so much that most do not even make it to graduation, not because of their skills, but because of their behavior. It's been statistically proven by the U.S. Justice Department that in the 3 to 5 years after a person with disabilities graduates high school, 31% of them are arrested. According to childrendefense.org, in 2010, nearly 200,000 minors between ages 10 to 17 were arrested in California alone. That year, California spent 4 times more money on a prisoner than a student. The need and urge for these services is evident, which explains why parents have to go to such extremes. They have to hire lawyers, they have to document everything, they have to travel far for services, quit their job, learn a new language, basically turn into a teacher, a therapist, a lawyer, an advocate, and so much more for their own child. So to answer the question, will our need for effective special education reforms build goodwill and better friendships? Definitely. Between student and teacher, parent and district. Fourth, will districts treating students like people instead of paperwork be beneficial to all concerned? Something that would help immensely is making parental involvement easier. Administrators and district personnel need to spread awareness and understanding of legislation to parents so that support is more accessible and meetings more effective. Additionally, we could spend money in far more beneficial ways. We could invest in sensory items, train or bring in counselors who know how to approach behavioral outbursts, or pay for new technology to support students. There are solutions to this issue, but the first step is acknowledging that there is an issue in the first place. The second step should be adding more funding to special education. Maybe if we didn't spend 4 times more money on a prisoner than a student, then our students with special needs would see graduation and not jail cells. I recognize that paperwork is important, but the way we do that paperwork needs to be improved. After all, this isn't just a city issue or a county issue or even a state issue. It is a nationwide problem and we need to address it. The people in charge need to realize that these students with different abilities are full of a lot of potential and could achieve great things if they just were exposed to the appropriate services. And all that starts with understanding these are people, not just paperwork.